Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics podcast. I'm your host, Simple Electronics. And with me, I say this every episode, but I think today it's especially valid. I have a very special guest. You may know him as the one with the crazy accent and the big beard, Big Clive. How are you, Clive?
All right, thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I've never heard my accent described like that, but that's fine. You never ever know what your own accent sounds like, do you?
No, and as a Canadian, obviously I have no accent. The rest of the world has an accent, right? That's how
Yes,
it works?
indeed. Absolutely, this is it. You guys don't have any accent at all.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. Here it is. This has been a little bit of time in the making. I think we were talking about doing the podcast months ago now, and finally things have calmed down for both of us, and here we are. Like, how's your life been in the last 6 months or so?
This year has been pandemonium. I think it must be the fact that there's been a lockdown, that the YouTube has been much busier than normal, and other things have been happening that it's just meant there haven't been enough hours in the day to keep up with everything, and it's just been pandemonium is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, pandemic-monium or something like that.
Absolutely.
You've been having some sort of like a renaissance. I think your channel has been kind of exploding with, especially with the live streams. How are you liking the live streams compared to the sort of overhead camera content?
Live streams are different for me. The only reason I started those was because I felt that, with the lockdown, people would be stuck at home, they'd be bored. So basically speaking, it's like a virtual pub meeting around a table. So that was the whole concept of those. But it's been interesting. It's been educational. Being able to actually maintain a live stream for 3 hours at a time. Once the whole pandemic thing's passed, I'm going to reduce the length because 3 hours is quite a long time for those streams. But that's more or less what's been happening there with those.
Yeah, and obviously you have a couple of interesting traditions during your live streams. So for the people that don't catch your live streams, and I think there's still quite a few that don't catch them because they're not actually on your main channel. They're on the Big Clive live channel. But yeah, and obviously all the links will be in the description below for people to go check it out. But you do whiffles at every hour?
The woofles are a small fireball from a 3D printed object, which you can actually find if you I'm not sure where you'll find it. If you look back through the live streams, in one of them you will see the description of the live stream is called Free Woofler. And it actually has a 3D printed object that doesn't particularly safe. You basically attach to the top of a can of lighter fuel, then put some soapy water in it, and it lets you blow combustible foam, which when you ignite it makes a nice big fireball. The other tradition is the Jägermunion, which is drinking toasts to, well, at the moment it used to be scientists, but unfortunately all the ones that were recommended were dead. But these days it's trades. So it's got a sort of routine. Every hour on the hour there's the Jägermunion, and then every half hour there's the woofle, there's the fireball. It's just something that happened, evolved that way.
I find it absolutely, it's so typical Clive to, you get yourself a 3D printer, and one of the things that you make up with it is a way to make fireballs a lot simpler. That's the most awesome thing I've ever heard of.
Indeed, that's the good side of 3D printers. The other thing have you seen that's the Woofler. The Whoosher was the other one. It takes a standard air freshener, little single shot air fresheners, and basically it's a mount that you put them in a plate, and then it puts a tea light in front so you can actually shoot fireballs with it. This is what 3D printers are for.
Yeah, this is awesome. We need people like you working on 3D printers, because stuff I do with my 3D printer is decidedly more boring. I'm just basically working in Fusion to make like sort of like functional prints, but there you are showing us what we should actually be doing with our printers.
It's also interesting because I use OpenSCAD. It means you can also just basically share it as a text file. So it turns out that YouTube, you can actually, in the description of the video, you can actually put the text file that will then generate the 3D object. So you can actually include the 3D print in the description itself without a link to another site.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome because OpenSCAD is more of like a command line type 3D generating software, right? Something like that.
It is. It's kind of better suited to the way I work because I'm used to programming in the sort of command line interface. It's just kind of seems more logical instead of being so graphical. You get something, you type in a number, that's what you'll physically get. And it means you have complete control over the shape of the object.
Is this kind of like a reflection of how you started in programming? Because I'm sure your beginnings of programming were way back, before the Arduinos, and probably in something like
to the 1970s. So they do go back a long way before things like. I evolved into microcontrollers, programming, assembly code, and things like that. If anything, I've got some Arduinos here. But I never quite clicked with Arduino yet. I need to find the correct project that makes me interested enough, because quite often I'll start a project, but I'll fall back onto using one of my existing little custom boards with a microcontroller on it, like a PIC 12 or a PIC 16.
Yeah, that's really funny because a lot of people got their starts in programming things like the PIC. But for me, I'm a bit younger. I'm 33. I found it more difficult to program the PICs than to program the Arduino. So I got into the Arduino a lot easier. I have PICs here that I still haven't attempted to program because it's just so much simpler. You plug in a USB, you open the Arduino IDE. It's a very simplified version of C++, and away I go. But for the PIC, it's a little bit harder, and assembly language is a little bit harder. But I guess when you started out, I mean, that's the only way to go, right? That was the only thing you could do.
Was at that time. When I started programming PICs, it was the very first affordable programming systems had just come out. Before that, it cost something like £10,000 for a development system to be able to just basically write the software for a microcontroller, and then quite often you had to send that into the factory and they'd program it in situ in the factory. That was just the way it kind of happened. And that's where Arizona Microchip, who they were called at the time, that's where they won sort of the microcontroller war, so to speak, by making their system affordable, because the people that then played about, the students that bought the systems, then as they went into careers, they tended to stay for many applications with the PIC microcontrollers just because, well, that's the one they learned on. Much like Arduino, because the Arduinos, you'll find a lot of Arduinos and Raspberry Pis turning up in industrial systems these days, simply because the younger generation have learned on them and they're comfortable with them.
Yeah, I had Andrea Riquetta from Arduino on the podcast, and he opened my eyes to all sorts of pro solutions that work that are in the Arduino world. So they've gone from like this kind of open source microcontroller for everyone type platform into a full-on pro platform. And he's saying that there's people in agricultural fields that rely on Arduino products to make sure like things get watered and stuff. Like it's pretty ridiculous how they transition from one end to the other.
The Arduino is basically a little industrial computer. It's kind of perfectly well suited to that.
Yeah, and some companies have even made Arduino type boards, so they use all the Arduino type interfacing and whatever, and designed it into ruggedized industrial PLC. So you can actually get an Arduino sort of form factory PLC, like full professional PLC, which is incredible if you think about it. How much we're supposed to rely on PLCs to work every single time.
Indeed. Also, the traditional PLCs usually had quite a lot of extra circuitry and software in them as backups to protect against unknown variables. That's something, if you ever designed something with an Arduino, say for instance you were heating a tank of water with the Arduino, you always have to take the industrial approach to it. and assume that the software is going to crash, or say for instance, you're driving a solid state relay, that it could basically fail short circuit. So you have to include all these extra layers of protection when you design something like that, that it's going to have something that doesn't rely on the Arduino that will actually cut it off. In the case of the hot washer, it could be a sort of final limit thermostat that just cuts it off if it goes above a pre-programmed temperature.
Yep. And, obviously you're still relying on picking the correct sensors, for example, because a thermal runaway won't get prevented if your sensor melts with it, right? So there's a lot of things to consider when you're programming stuff like this.
A good example of that, and it's a situation that they didn't program it in. Sometimes the wires and the thermistors in 3D printers break, or the thermistors pop out the head completely, and there have been fires as a result of that, where the head of the printer just kept heating and got hotter and hotter until something combusted or started burning in general.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, there are some less than savvy 3D printer companies that had just turned off the thermal runaway protection in the firmware because it was causing errors and stuff like that. So you really have to be careful where you buy your 3D printer from and realize that it's still very much a hobby thing. It's not 3D printers, unless you pay like, $10,000 or more, are really not made for the general public just yet.
I wouldn't say that the price going that high, but I would say that don't walk away and leave them unattended in the vicinity of flammable things. You just have to assume the worst case can happen and keep an eye on things.
Absolutely. Or the best case scenario of a failure. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
For instance, when the spaghetti monster visits and you go back through and it's just a pile of mints where your print was supposed to be because something went wrong and it's been spewing the filament out into thin air.
I've been very lucky. That hasn't happened to me yet. So far, so good, even though my 3D printer is like one of the cheapest you could have bought at the time.
Yeah. Well, even the cheap ones are pretty good. They're very impressive. Sometimes require a bit of fine tuning and sort of maybe a bit of extra attention and care, but the quality of the results is usually perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, and obviously it's a great feature that you need to slice your device before you print it, because that allows you an extra layer of customization where you can choose to go, much slower if your 3D printer, for example, the head rings on fast movement. Well, you can just slow everything down. So it's actually pretty neat that there's that extra layer that you have to pay attention to, because it usually ends up with better prints.
Yes, it is good, that option. That's one thing I have to do with mine is I have to slow the one I'm currently using is an FL Sun Q5 Delta printer. It tends to traverse when it's moving from one position, one part of a print to the other. It tends to go a lot faster than it really should, and it results in a sort of distinct jump from the unit when it does so. There's no harm in just slowing that down. It probably takes a lot of strain off the printer as well.
Yeah, and there's even if you don't want to change the final speed, you can change the acceleration curves either in your firmware or in your slicer. Your slicer, if you set them specifically, they'll override what the firmware values are. So that's pretty neat. What kind of slicer do you use for your 3D printer?
I'm using Cura.
Okay, that's the same one I'm using too.
It just seems one of the most popular ones. I did look at others, but the one that was most intuitive was Cura, although it does take a very long time. And the particular system I use, it takes a quite long time to start up. Seems to be loading quite a lot in the background.
Yeah, mine does that too. And I have a pretty good computer that I'm running it on. I think it's just either it's loading a lot of stuff like you're saying, or it's just not optimized for quick startups and quick shutdowns.
Yeah. I just when I've been using it, I just tend to minimize it and leave it in the background so I can just jump straight back into it. So I've got another design or I've got a tweak to an existing design. Quite clever. It sees you do that. If you actually change the file, it seems to just check on a file every so often. If it sees it's been changed, it'll actually come up on the screen saying, do you want to reload this file because you've changed it. It's quite well thought out. It's quite geeky as a piece of software.
Your whole channel is kind of based on your mobile phone and a Chromebook, right? Or do you have a PC for editing?
I do all the editing that gets done, and it's not a lot. You may hear a compressor just start in the background. Everything is done on a mobile phone. It's currently a Moto G7 Power, just a generic phone, and any splicing and editing as such, and there really isn't much gets done in that. And any audio processing gets done in it before it gets uploaded. So it all gets done on a single device. It's the only way you can really do it when you put up a lot of content.
Yeah, or you can just, drive yourself nuts like me. I'm in the middle of a content blitz right now. My goal is to produce one video per day for the next 3 weeks, basically, because my next contract, I should say, got pushed back an extra bunch of weeks. So I'm trying to make hay while the sun shines.
Right, okay. That can be quite fatiguing if you try to do too many videos. I've done that myself in the same situation as you, that if I'm going to be working away, I'll try and make some videos in advance, but it's not as simple as just saying, make some videos in advance. You've got to try and keep them interesting as well, and not just sort of skip and take shortcuts. So it can be quite tiring trying to put that level of content out.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you're making stuff as complicated as yours, because for some reason, you managed to make every single light bulb teardown interesting. What's your method for this?
Channels evolved. Initially, when I took them apart, I just roughly doodled a design. I didn't go into it too deeply. As time has gone on, I'm taking, the pictures of the printed circuit boards and then actually reverse engineering them properly, and the complexity of some of the stuff has gone higher and higher. So some of those videos take several days to make because the circuit boards turn out to be really complex and quite hard to trace through because they are, say, multiple layer circuit boards, and that can just make things a bit trickier for reverse engineering. It also doesn't help that many of the chips these days are quite hard to find data sheets on, or the numbers on them don't really reflect what the chip actually is because it's a sort of manufacturer's number.
Yeah, or they got lasered off because they don't want you to reverse engineer them, right?
Indeed, but you can usually work out what they are when they do that.
Oh yeah, I've learned so much from watching your videos, and I told you in the sort of pre-chat that I've been watching your content for, God, I don't know how long. I'm guessing it's 6 years, but it might be more. Who knows? What is some of the things that you found that mass manufacturers have done that you found really clever? Like what kind of maybe shortcuts or efficiencies have they done that you're like, huh, that's really interesting. I would have never thought of that.
It's hard to think of a specific one, but usually when a manufacturer's made something down to a price, they do some very clever things at times where one component will have multiple functions, or just, instead of having a completely separate section, they'll just tap off from say, a signal from a specific part of a previous bit of circuitry and just use that as a reference to avoid having to redo it all over again. But one of the most common questions I get asked is why I don't do more up-the-market devices, and the answer is that the cheap, crappy stuff is actually more fun because they have taken those shortcuts and cut corners, and the upmarket stuff is often over-integrated. It's just custom chips, or it's just too textbook to be interesting. It's just covered in chips and extra circuitry that the cheaper products would have skimped and got rid of.
I kind of like the danger analyses that you do with the cheap products too, because I like using cheap products. I like buying cheap products. And I really find it interesting when, you pull one apart and you're like, oh, this one only has, like 2 millimeters of separation here. So I think the cheaper stuff is also more interesting in a sense of, what they should have done but did not.
It's educational. That 2 millimeters is good on so much of that stuff because a lot of the stuff, they'll just literally put pads and tracks right up next to each other, one with 5 volt on it, the other with 240 volts on it. I don't know what it is that, the people who are copying these know how to copy a circuit board, but they don't understand electrical separation, so they kind of copy it component for component, but mush it all into a different shape with absolutely utter disregard for the separation. I've never really understood that, why they would do such a thing, particularly in the shitty pink USB charger from China situation, where there was literally 2 pads squished right up against each other with 240 in one and the output 5 volts in the other, and a little blob of solder just sitting between them just to help it on its way.
My honest to goodness favorite is when they route the tracks in a certain way, and then they cut a slot in the PCB, and then just a couple centimeters over to the left, the pads end up side by side again. Like, you were so close to doing it right. What happened?
Yeah, that does happen a lot. It's very strange. I don't know again if they're copying another design but not understanding it and just changing the shape and saying, well, we have to put a slot in here, and they just put the slot in but don't understand why they're doing it. It's very strange, that. Another thing I often see is the Class Y capacitor. That's used in switch mode power supplies. It's the blue capacitor, and it's designed that if it ever fails, it's like a standard ceramic capacitor, but it's usually a lot thicker. It's designed so that if it fails, it will fail in a safe condition, so you can avoid in contact with live connections. But they'll often just use an off-the-shelf standard capacitor that isn't rated Class Y, just because they obviously felt that a 1 nanofarad capacitor was good enough for that situation, because that's what had been used elsewhere. It's very strange. Don't know why they do that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I also, like, how do you even pick what you think is going to be interesting? Like, obviously, I feel like you go shopping on eBay, but what's your routine to, like, select things for teardown?
Cheap and interesting is the primary things I look for. Just maybe an extreme function. At the moment, my thing is ozone. I've been going into ozone generators far too much, to the point that I'm boring people. But in this case, there's so many versions, and oddly, I ordered 3 different units recently. One that was quite well made, and I ordered a similar one thinking it was from the same manufacturer, but it was completely different. And then I ordered another one that looks really similar again, but again, they've all 3 of them have completely different ways of generating the ozone. It's very strange.
But that's what makes it super interesting, right? When you got A, B, and C, and each one of them have a different, a different path to D.
It is, especially when they look identical, and you'd think literally it's going to be the same circuit breaker in each one, circuit board, should I say. But in reality, it turns out that they're almost like they were designed in completely different factories. Presumably a copy of one standard product. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what the original is.
Yeah, it's so weird, because you think these products would just come from, like, second shifts, right? Like, someone makes a reasonable product, and then they come over and they prune a bunch of the important parts off, but it still works, and then they produce this on second shift. But it really seems like they are building bespoke products, which is odd to me.
Yeah. Another one I got recently, it's an old design. I think I'm trying to work out when I got the original one, but goes back a long, long way. And I bought one from AliExpress, and I'll be making a video about it, but I preemptively took a look inside. It's like they couldn't have designed it to be more expensive to make. It's nicely done inside. It's got good quality components. Its standby current is super low. It's like they claim it can run for months on one set of batteries, and I believe them. I think it could. But there are so many sections of plastic and so many screws that it must take absolutely ages to put it together. And you can see that some of the copies are where they've basically said, well, we don't want that complexity. We can make it a lot cheaper. We can make it 2 bits of a plastic shell and then just colour the plastic as a bit of trim. So they really cut the corner back that way. Very odd. And there's some products that take standard batteries, AA batteries, and they claim once again they'll run for months, but then you measure the quiescent current and it's ridiculous. The standby current is so high that they're probably just leaving the processor running at full speed, even when it's not supposed to be, even when it's supposed to be sleeping between cycles, so to speak. Strange.
Just really weird. Like, yeah, I guess I don't get it. Like, I feel like a lot of these designs, there should be, you know how on data sheets there's like the standard design for stuff. I feel like a lot of these things should be standardized by now. I mean, there's only a certain amount of ways to do it, but yet we see such variance from product to product.
Many of the products, they have literally copied the data sheet, but the one most common thing I see removed is they'll remove decoupling capacitors from certain parts of the circuit board. They presumably remove them and see if it still works, and then remove another one and see if it still works and just push it right to the edge of stability.
Yeah, there was a famous engineer that did that. He would go around and lop off components until it stopped working, and then put that component back, presumably. And he was known for that. I don't remember the name, and I was told the name before, but I don't remember anymore.
Yeah. Heard that story as well, and I'm not sure if that's true or not, but having said that, you can make calculated decisions and remove specific components. I always, on my own designs, go overboard. I will include those decoupling capacitors everywhere they should basically be by tradition. And I know fine well that you could leave some of them out, but I prefer to leave them in because it doesn't cost that much more to add them, and it potentially increases reliability.
Oh yeah, especially when you're doing onesies and twosies, like what I'm doing, and what presumably you're doing. I don't think you're producing any circuit boards commercially anymore, are you?
Not really, no. I do sell some stuff, not right at the moment because of the way the shipping's gone recently. Most of it is just basically control modules, so there's nothing really commercial as such.
Speaking of shipping, a friend of mine has sent you a package, and you had opened it, and you had done a teardown on a cable reel on a Ford. I don't know if you remember that, but he sent
Yes,
you
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, junk from work. He had sent you a can of maple syrup as well. Did you
Still,
eat that maple syrup?
still have the little jar of maple syrup in the style of a maple leaf. It's actually through in the cupboard next to the coffee. I've not partaken of that yet.
You
Some
should.
reason, yeah, for some reason, I do like maple syrup. For some reason, his package arrived rebagged and wet. So the postal service, having got wet, they rebagged it to make sure all the water stayed in. And when it arrived, everything was just soaking mush inside. It was pretty. I had to leave everything out to dry for a while. I think the postal service would kind of let it dry a bit before rebagging it, but they didn't.
Was it
Strange.
water, or was it like the oil from inside the cable reel that had leaked out?
I wondered if something like that had happened, but there was some lubricant in the reel, but it wasn't that. It seemed to be water that had contaminated it. Well, I hope it was water. Could have been from another package that had a bottle had broken or something.
I wonder where you get water when you're shipping things to an island. Bizarre, huh?
Mm, indeed. Someone else from Canada did try shipping me a bottle of maple syrup, and it was seized by customs here in the UK. And they were told they got a message back, I think, saying that it had been seized and destroyed because it was considered a dangerous item to ship. They were going through a completely weird phase at the time. They were just seizing everything. My brother, had several bottles of whiskey seized. And it later came out that some members of the post office had been found drunk because they'd basically been seizing and destroying it by drinking it.
Wow.
Mm.
When you design your own circuit boards, what kind of software are you using for that?
Circuit boards. I originally started out using an old DOS piece of software called BoardMaker, and I've always been a bit sort of practical about it. I tend to doodle schematics down in a notepad, pretty much as you see in the videos. I rarely use the schematic side of the software, so these days I use. What do I use? I'm going to have to think about that now. What do I use?
Is it a web-based software?
Isn't. Oh, how have I forgotten that? Oh, I'll remember. Layout 50. That's what I use. I think it's up to layout 60 now. But the reason I started using that one is because I was frustrated because all the software, like Eagle, had this really steep learning curve. It was nothing like the original software I'd used. And someone said that if you've grown up with BoardMaker, I'd recommend the layout 50. And I tried it, and it lets you literally just bang pads and tracks down to your heart's content. It doesn't force you to document everything. You can just slap them down. And it's been very good, but I really need to look at KiCad, and I really need to look at the Easy EDA to see, because they're so heavily integrated, the manufacturers now, they're more accessible, that maybe it's a good idea to actually take a look at those.
Yeah, I use KiCad myself because it's open source. So I really do like supporting open source projects. And it does have a bit of a steep learning curve. I'm not sure if you would be able to just do it without the schematic portion because sort of the PCB is built off the schematic. But once you do get used to it, I have to say it is a pretty nice piece of software and it's unlimited. You can build a 12-layer board if you want. Like, it's pretty nice.
We'll have to try it someday. Someone has said that I think you can just go straight to laying pads and tracks down, but it would be that initial learning stage of finding that, how to do that in the first place. When you've been using a particular piece of software for a while, like the Sprint Layout 50, you get so used to it that switching to any other platform is like a chore, because if you have a circuit board design, it's going to take you so long to learn it as you design it, versus if you use your original software that you're familiar with and you can just bang it down. So it's tricky. I will have to switch at some point, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure when that will happen.
I would actually really love a video of you sharing your process of building the boards, whether or not that be on KiCad after you've gotten used to it, or even on Layout 50. It would be really interesting to see inside the mind of Clive, so to speak.
Well, one of the nice things about microcontrollers is it does make laying the circuit boards out a lot easier, because you can pretty much assign any pin to be anything on the microcontroller. Certainly, there are groups that you'll want to keep together. Supposing I've got outputs, say, got 8 outputs at ULN 2803 Darlington driver or something like that, it does help. It does make it easier when you're writing software if all the port bits of a particular 8-bit port are aligned on that side of the microcontroller. But it makes it easier than it used to be in the past with designing with discrete circuitry. Microcontrollers have definitely had a huge effect in that way.
Oh, absolutely. Have you messed at all with like the AT Tiny microcontrollers, like the little 8-pin Arduino compatibles?
I haven't, but what I would like to play about with is the Padooks. It's unfortunate that the Padook microcontrollers aren't so easy to program. There is some open source firmware for that now, for programming them, but the standard bench programmers you get don't seem to deal with them for some reason. I think it's because their programming voltage is higher than average.
Yeah, I've looked up. There's open source projects to build basically the circuit board that you need to program those things. But I believe the smallest board I've seen had something like 40 odd components or 50 odd components. So that's what's stopping me from messing with those Padooks. Is honestly, I would just prefer if I can just either buy a kit or buy the finished programmer, because hunting down components, you can't buy, for example, whatever, a 2.2 picofarad capacitor in one-off quantities. I mean, or else you're paying like 10 times the price. So I would rather just have a kit, but there's no such kits at the moment exist.
Yeah. Something tempting about the idea of using a cheap Chinese generic microcontroller costs literally cents and making it do something really ridiculously complex. That's part of the challenge of when you program in assembly code, you can do stuff like that. You can crush huge programs into tiny spaces by using devious programming techniques.
Oh yeah, because I think you're in assembly, you're dealing with registers directly, right? You're actually like controlling the flow of bits inside the micro.
You're dealing with absolutely everything at a raw level. In the microcontroller, you're setting the control bits and the control modules, and you're basically storing data bit by bite, so to speak. It does make it quite hard to initially program microcontrollers. That's where the Arduino, once again, made things a lot easier. It hides all that from you. But it's super efficient. It means that, you can achieve in just 20 bytes of code, you can achieve something quite spectacular.
Yeah, that's on my goal list of learning assembly code, because assembly code is one of those things that'll never go out of fashion, really. You'll always be able to program in assembler, right? And once you do learn assembly code, it kind of gives you the logic of how the microcontroller actually functions, I believe.
Does. It helps you understand a microcontroller completely, which means that when you program in a higher level language, you can use it more efficiently as well by knowing exactly what's going on inside, if you're kind of exposed to that in that language. Having said that, many of the modern microcontrollers, where you could program in assembly code, they're kind of optimized to be programmed in C-type languages. It's because their functionality is going more Arduino-ish in that direction, but in a single chip.
Yeah, and let's be honest, a lot of the functionality in a modern microcontroller like a ESP32 would take absolute ages to program in assembly, whereas you can just interface with the library and everything's already done for you.
Indeed. But the downside of that is that you find that modern chips have to have a lot of memory, just because literally they're being programmed in some instances with bloatware, and it's huge quantities of modules are being used, written by other people to actually control particular features. And without knowing if they are 100% perfectly written, it also kind of means that you can't guarantee just how stable the code's going to be, and it can make it quite hard finding bugs with the code when someone else's module from a library is actually playing up under very specific conditions.
Yeah, that's very true. Thankfully, my skills haven't brought me far enough for that to be an issue yet. I mean, one day maybe, but not yet.
Another huge advantage of the Arduino's modules, if you go on eBay and just type Arduino module, you can get some really amazing stuff that wouldn't ever have existed for other applications. So I quite commonly use modules that are designed for the Arduino just simply as a cheap way of getting that module or that component for other applications. Things like, temperature and humidity sensors or time of flight range finders and stuff like that. It's all available much cheaper than it would have been in the past, because it's become basically cheap electronic Lego for kids now.
Yeah, the economies of scale are really one of the things that Arduino has brought out to the masses. That's for 100% sure.
Yes.
Do you have any YouTube channels that you personally watch that you'd like to recommend to people?
My recreational channels tend to be in different areas. So, for instance, I quite like watching mechanical channels like Steve Summers, who's a machinist, and A-Bombs 79, I think it is, who's also a machinist. Then there's South Main Auto, who's a car mechanic, basically working in a garage. And I find those quite recreational compared to... I don't tend to watch so many electronic channels simply because I kind of do electronics all the time, so my recreation is something different. And it's interesting to note that a lot of the people who watch my channel are programmers, because they don't necessarily want to do programming recreationally or look at software channels. So their recreation on YouTube is the next level. It's a physical side of things. It's electronic channels or electrical ones.
I can definitely add a recommendation for South Main Auto. I have never missed any one of his videos, and I am a licensed mechanic here in Canada. And
Right.
I'll have to tell you, he's one of the few guys that I've seen publish their work that I really have nothing bad to say about. All his methods are solid. His reasoning is solid. And this is the kind of mechanic you would want to bring your car to. He seems like a really skilled guy.
It's practical and genuine. If he makes a mistake, like we all make mistakes, and he sticks a terminal in the wrong connection, he'll laugh it off and say that, look what I did, and how silly of me. And it's good when channels do that. I don't like the ones that just jump cut and you see what they did and then they try and hide it and pretend nothing happened. like when you get people building electronic things and they say, right, we'll test it now. And then you see them connect it up, nothing happens. Then it jump cuts and then it's like, oh, and there it is. It's working as if nothing happened. It would have been so much more realistic and honest if they'd actually shown this is what went wrong and then showed how they fixed it. So that's another nice thing about South Main Auto. He is very good, Eric.
Oh yeah, and I totally agree about the mistakes thing. I mean, I make mistakes all the freaking time, and I try my best to leave them in. Sometimes narratively it doesn't fit. Like I'd have to explain my work up to the mistake, and then the mistake, and then my work back to where we were. But for example, I mean, I even have a sponsorship. There's a company that sponsors me to make circuit boards for them. They're not sponsoring this podcast, so you can figure it out on your own. But I mean, I messed up a design, and it like I was bummed about it because it just like, how can I make such a bad mistake? But what the deal is in that video, I'm going to be like, look, here is my messed up board. Like, here's where I made a mistake, and I'm going to show it in KiCad where I made my mistake, to make sure other people don't make the same one.
Yeah. I've found in the past, I used to make my prototypes by hand because in the past, before companies like GLCP or PCBWay or Seed Studios or Dirty PCBs, all those companies in China, before that, if you wanted to get a circuit board manufactured, you had to design it and take it to a local company here in the UK, and the minimum number of circuit boards would be 100, and the cost was enormous to get those made. And it would also, it's ironic that, I ordered one of those companies that used to be local in the past in the UK, and I ordered from a modern, like a JLC PCB or whoever, then the JLC PCBs would arrive before the ones being made locally got delivered. They were so slow, and they were so complex processes that it cost a fortune. So if you made a mistake in a commercial circuit board, you lost literally thousands of pounds. So I always got in the habit of making prototypes manually first, and that also let you get the component placement. Other thing, without even making the full circuit board, I'd often print a component layout, and then I'd put it on a bit of polystyrene, and I'd actually press the components into it just to see how they were going to sit, and whether something like a potentiometer was going to conflict with a diode or a resistor next to it, or if a capacitor was going to be a lot bigger than expected. All these things are just not the sort of thing you want to find out when you've been handed a stack of circuit boards for £1,000.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. That's another economy of scale thing, is these quick manufacturers of PCBs have been awesome in order to get PCBs in the hands of the likes of you and me, because I don't know about you, but there's no way I could afford to order 100 board minimum order. But now for $5, pretty much any Chinese manufacturer will make you a board, which is neat.
Very good. I've been watching some people designing boards and using those services, and their first board was terrible. It was like the pads were tiny, the tracks were super, like, you didn't really understand that thicker tracks are better. But then their next circuit board, because they're able to actually get them manufactured, their next circuit board has improved, thicker tracks, thicker pads. And then as time goes on, their designs, because they're actually getting these boards made and they're populating the components, their quality of their designs just increases each time. It's been pretty good. So that those circuit board manufacturers have helped evolve printed circuit board design skills quite greatly in, well, Canada, America, Europe and Britain and other places like that.
Yeah, I'm finding myself, well, first of all, I still enjoy really cheap eBay stuff. I have not changed, but now I'm ordering components first and then finding a matching footprint to go into the software. And recently I've ordered a whole bunch of components that did not have an existing footprint in the libraries. So I'm actually making custom footprints now. So like, it's all these skills that I would have never sort of known about until you get going into this rabbit hole, right?
With the crude design, the process that I use, just the banging pads and tracks down, I pretty much lay down every footprint just from habitually knowing how many tenths of an inch apart it is for between pads. And if I have a complex footprint like a USB connector, just fine tune and nudge it, print it out, and then lay the component on it and see how it came out. But in the future, if I need that component, I should put it into a library, but literally, I'll go to a previous design and I'll just highlight it and copy and paste it across into the new design. And it's just my lazy ass way of doing it.
Hey, it's a valid way. The only thing that's driving me to do it properly, if I'm being honest here, is that I want to release the footprints and the designs and the PCBs open source. So that's the only thing really that's keeping me doing it the right way, is that in my mind, in the future, somebody's going to want this and use it. So that's why I'm doing it like that way.
I prefer to release the circuit boards as just the Gerber files ready for manufacture. Because when even by sloppy design techniques, it still produces the same manufacturing files. So it's useful to be able to just basically, the way it stops designs being copied as well. They can use your Gerber file, but you can put identifying text and stuff like that on it. But if you put the whole file up, the original design file, they can then replace your text with their text and so on like that. And basically it makes it easier to, shall we say, steal your design basically.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I mean, like, even I want to publish the footprints, for example, so that everybody can use let's say I've got these ATM fuse holders, these automotive fuse holders that don't have a footprint. So I made a footprint, and if it works when my boards get here, then I'm going to release that footprint so that anybody can use these in their designs, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's useful, yep. It's also good, some of the component some of the printed circuit board design packages will let you submit footprints to their main libraries, and they'd go out with subsequent versions of software.
Ooh, KiCad might do that. I might take a look, because I'm probably on my 6th or 7th custom footprint now, so it would be nice if they did accept them.
Yes. I guess in the fuses, it would be quite important, given the pressure of people pushing fuses in and out, to make sure you get really big pads with those as well.
Yeah, also I put in some giant pads.
Giant pads are always good. Use all the copper.
Yeah, I mean, the board comes with copper, right? I try not to etch away sort of the precious part of the board.
Indeed.
We talked a little bit about you watching the trades. What would you say is the importance of trades in today's world?
I think it's important for everybody to get a trade, sort of a construction industry trade if possible, because you can diversify from that. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but in the UK they're de-skilling as much as possible. They're basically, they've skimped on giving proper training and apprenticeships. Now they're trying to instantly qualify people in 1-week courses or one-day slideshow presentations, and it's just not the way to do things. So I tend to recommend that if people want to go into something exotic like the event industry, the entertainment industry, that they get a trade first, because it's useful to have something to fall back on. And in your case, that could be mechanic. For me, it's electrician, but heating engineer, plumber, joiner, welder, painter, everything is valid. And it always gives you something to fall back on if your choice of career, other than, if you don't enjoy doing that, if you end up diversifying into something more exotic and that doesn't go to plan, it always gives you something to fall back on that will usually pay quite well.
Yeah, that's very true. I would say here, if I would to make a recommendation, is to avoid auto mechanics here in Canada, at least, because the industry is so used to abusing the crap out of their employees that at this point we have nobody left coming into the trade, and this has been going on for years, and the salaries have still remained stagnant here. So the employers would rather shut the doors than pay a little bit more. So I would recommend against. It's
just happening everywhere. I would almost in a way recommend against becoming an electrician these days. But having said that, it's still useful to get the trade. It's even for your own personal use or being able to fix your vehicle or friends' vehicles. It's useful to get those skills.
Yeah, that I would definitely agree. Being an automotive mechanic has definitely shaped the way I see my everyday life, because everything became fixable to me. like maybe not successfully. Maybe sometimes you need a part that needs to be created from nowhere. But it's true, like everything that I see is fixable. And even if it's an electronic thing, I have that I can fix it mentality. So then I go to a YouTube channel like yours, or even to the extreme, like someone like Louis Rossman, and you realize that, yeah, everything is fixable. It just takes, it depends on the amount of effort.
I have to say that YouTube is one of the best educational resources available for trades. Because if you go to, I see people wanting to go to university or college to learn a trade, I tend to recommend they go for an apprenticeship. But if you look at certain channels, like say for instance, Eric O, you're seeing someone working on a different vehicle every single time with different faults, and he's showing you his thought process as he finds those faults. There are so many good channels like that. And another one that comes to mind is a guy called MI Heating Guy. And he's just basically going around fixing people's heating systems, but he always has the camera. And it's like he puts a video up just about every day. And he follows one or two jobs that he does, and you're seeing him diagnose which fault it is. And after a while, he opens them up. You can kind of work out what the fault is already and what he's going to do, because, you're getting an education that is beyond what a college or university could provide.
Yeah. And, here in Canada, at least in my province, Ontario, the government says very rightly that a college education goes hand in hand with on-the-job training. So basically, I've moved up from being just an automotive mechanic. I am now a contract professor at a college, and I still work at the garage on weekends. But they know and they understand that you do need the theory behind how things work in the classroom. But more than that is you need the time to be able to apply it. You need the situations in order to be able to apply them in the field. So when we do our apprenticeship programs here, it's 3 years to become a mechanic. It's 2 months sitting in a classroom, and then 1 year out in the trade, 2 months in the classroom, another year, and another 2 months in the classroom, and then another year or so, and then you write your license. So I completely agree with you. The hands-on stuff is so important.
That's a good approach to take, the amount of time actually working the tools, and then bursts of college. The way I did it when I did my apprenticeship, it was 3 years of what's called day release, where for a part of the year you'd be released 1 day a week to college, technical college, but the rest of the time you'd be working on the tools. And if you tried giving someone just the theory in its own, wouldn't really make sense to them. But if you're actually working with the things, like in your case, working on vehicles, and then you suddenly realize that you don't know what a particular component does or how it works, and then it's explained by you at the college or university, then it makes so much more sense then, because now they actually understand what you're talking about, and you're not just talking about some random black box component with some wires sticking out it.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And I find like my students respect me a lot more than, I respected my university teachers, because I knew that in theory the university professors were knowledgeable, but not in practice. I didn't see it in practice. But when my students are like, hey, we did this in the shop, why did we do it like that? And I'm able to explain to them exactly the working principles behind it, they're immediately like, oh, that's why, right? It's really important to tie those two together, or else, because the theory and the practical can't exist in a vacuum. Like they're all part of each other, right? I guess, I don't know if I'm making sense here.
Absolutely. It's good that you are effectively still a working mechanic, but actually teaching as well, because many of the lecturers these days are not tied into the physical, practical side, particularly these like one-day slideshow presentation training systems that they do, where the only qualification the person who's presenting it is they know how to run a slideshow presentation and just basically read what comes up on the screen. I was quite fortunate. I did my apprenticeship in an era that the guys at the college lecturers were tradesmen. They'd spent their life working in the electrical industry, so they knew deeply what was involved, and often the conversation wouldn't just follow the standard syllabus text, it would diversify into a little tangent when they were talking about a particular job they did, or how things could go wrong, how it didn't really tally up with the course notes and such like that.
Yeah, I think that's just that's a major failure is if you don't have that, right? You really want, and in fact, perhaps you can educate me in your field, but in mine, I'm learning new stuff all the time. Like, it doesn't end. The technology keeps rolling and we're learning new stuff. The fundamentals stay the same, but the application of those fundamentals are now getting so buried behind other tech that you really need to keep up. And I don't know if it was the same when you were learning too.
Absolutely. It's evolving all the time. You do have to have an interest in your subject and keep up to date because it does evolve. I have to say, in vehicles, it's a slightly demoralizing way it's evolving, in the sense they've added in all these extra complexities like catalytic converters and things like that. Plus, they've also made the software and the security between all the modules and on the canvas in a vehicle just that bit more complex. I don't know if it's to stop people trying to repair them themselves, or it's just a security thing to prevent clocking and stuff like that. But the knock-on effect is that doing a simple repair then becomes this huge spell of, well, you've seen Eric Code doing it, the tablet going through all the codes and things like that, and not one of his tablets will do all the different vehicles. It all has to be different systems.
I can show you, there is a lot of negative sides of that for sure, but I can explain to you some of the positives. For example, the law states, as per the OBD2 standards, which is OBD stands for onboard diagnostics, and 2 is just a second generation, that the modules require by law the ability to have them be updated by the manufacturer. And so because of that, now we have tools, and they're not open source tools because people have invested, like companies have invested a lot of energy into figuring out how to do this. But now we have tools that you can update the software pretty much infinitely. So anything you want to change, any parameter you want to change, you can change it, but you need the right tools. So what we need is we need someone to release open source interfacing software for every brand. I think that's the downside. So the positive side is they can be reprogrammed to whatever extent you want. The downside is the people who have figured out how to do so are just making money by selling the solutions.
Downside of the open source version is that would be a full-time job. It wouldn't be something, it would have to be open source but funded in some way, because that would be basically quite a full-time job. As I say, it would be a lot of work to create something like that. Do you know what's coming to mind is those fake OBD vehicle programmers that optimize your vehicle. The ones that you plug into the OBD port and they put on a wee light show and pretend to be doing stuff, but in reality they're not even interfacing the vehicle. All they're doing is putting on the light show and saying, you know, your vehicle is now turbocharged, but you won't notice it until you've been driving for quite a distance. It's long enough to get out the warranty period for your fake dongle.
Yeah, when you made those videos, I think you had 2 of them. When you made them, I was so skeptical because it is easy to update some weird parameters inside. Like, some of the parameters are less hidden than others. And so I figured, well, maybe they're doing things like changing the MAP or MAF. So MAP is manifold absolute pressure sensor, and MAF is mass airflow sensor. Those are 2 different sensors that you can use to decide how much fuel to inject. And I was just wondering if they had just bumped up the calibration value to inject more fuel. But then when you notice that the data lines were shorted to ground or whatever, that's when it flew the coop. There's no way it's doing anything.
Yeah. Initially, I didn't notice. It was Dave at EEV Blog spotted that from my video. He saw that there were printed on the screen print pads underneath the chips. So it was after him taking a look that I went back and opened it again and saw, oh yeah, I should have taken a closer look at that. because they weren't even connected at all. Even though there were sort of tracks there, they weren't actually connected to them. And then when I got the other ones and took a look at them as well, they were once again. There was no way they could actually do anything on the CAN bus, which is probably just as well. Although some people have said they plugged it in and it did cause a conflict because there might have been a fault in the circuit board or a splash of solder, but it actually took down the CAN bus and just threw up loads of errors because it was basically shorting it to ground.
Fantastic. So it did something. It puts your car into limp home mode, and then your fueling is all the way off.
They could call it the OBD2 knee breaker because it brings your vehicle to its knees.
Most of my customers in my professional life do that themselves. They don't need a programmer to do that.
Indeed. But that's why you're there to fix it.
Yep. And yeah, very, very much so. That's one thing I have to remind my students a lot is they say, people are so useless with their cars. How can they be so useless? And I'm like, look, buddy, if everyone knew about their car the way you know about their car, you'd be out of work. Sorry, I've kind of smashed the mic there.
It's all right. It does make me think of Eric O's reference to the engine light as the money light. That's true enough. It lights up its time to give mechanics money.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, and I frequent a subreddit a lot called Car Help, where basically people describe their problems, and then I try to help them kind of anonymously, because my workplace certainly doesn't pay me to advertise, so I wouldn't advertise them anywhere. But a lot of people, they come in and they say, my car's running fine. Should I get this fixed? And that is an interesting question, because your individual sensors are reporting back to the engine control unit, the ECU. However, a lot of this information can be derived by different sensors. So you can look at 2 or 3 different sensors and kind of see if that, the faulty sensor is faulty or not. And the answer is probably you should get it replaced, because what happens is that's a far less precise way of monitoring your engine than the original sensor. So you're getting less fuel mileage, you're probably getting less power. The car is adapting strangely, like the fueling tables will change and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a money light. You should probably get your car fixed though.
Yeah, I was thinking that, performance and efficiency would be a factor if one of the sensors was down. At least it can help you diagnose it. And you can get the OBD readers yourself, the Bluetooth ones. Now, you've probably heard of the Elm reader. Is it Elm 328 or Elm 327?
I think there's a 5 in there. I have one here somewhere.
They're all over like eBay. You can get them from everywhere. The reason the Elm is so popular is because the company that wrote the software, they just wrote the software for the chip. They unfortunately released the chips without locking them initially. And as such, someone just copied the software on them, and that's why the Chinese absolutely plaster these everywhere. But you're basically getting something with one of the earliest versions of the software. It's not up to date at all. Kind of sad. During COVID, Elm have decided that they've kind of had enough. And, although they have been continuing to produce software, they're kind of calling it a day now. That's one of those things that if you ever do write software, always remember to lock your chips up. And although it's nice to share stuff online, sometimes it can end up in commercial products, and it doesn't feel too great when that happens, when you shared something for free purely for the, open sourcing it, and then it gets used commercially and someone's cashing in it.
Yeah, I feel so strongly about open source, though, that I think whatever I've done, if I released it open source, it just is what it is. I feel like, I guess maybe it's the teacher side of me. I feel like stuff like information and stuff like that should be free for everyone. And I guess that extends to like digital goods for me. So I guess.
Yes. I've put a lot of stuff out free as well, and circuit board designs and stuff like that. But way back at the beginning, I wrote some PIC microcontroller software for RGB control for pulse width modulation of RGB lights. And it was right at the beginning when RGB stuff was just coming out. And I put the software up free on my website. And next thing I know, it's in someone else's commercial product in a modified form. And after that, I got quite defensive. I put up a version that was free, but it always defaulted to the first program setting. But I decided as a precaution I was going to sell it on pre-locked chips after that. And the cost was just to cover the chip, postage, and a little bit extra. And it turned out quite a useful income I got from that. I ended up sending thousands of chips out everywhere. So sometimes it's useful too, if your software is very good, if you've evolved it, is, sell it, but at a sensible price that people can afford it, but it still brings a little bit in for yourself.
Oh yeah, and it would never denigrate anybody that wanted to make a living from their work. I guess personally I'm going the other direction.
Okay, it's reasonable enough.
Yeah.
Originally, when I put my website up, it was had no advertising on it at all. I was only putting it up because I feel like whatever you take from the internet, you should put back on something in return. And likewise, the channel at the beginning, there was no advertising on my channel. That's something that's worth mentioning. If you have a YouTube channel and it's not, it's not really established, it's not huge yet, and you decide not to put adverts on it, keep in mind that if you don't, because Fran Lab, Fran was putting videos up and she wasn't getting many hits in the videos. It was only when she added adverts onto them that YouTube started pushing it more, because that's how it makes its money. So sometimes you just have to add a little bit of commercial to it, so to speak, to actually get the videos delivered in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you with that. But I still refuse to put mid-rolls. So I put pre-rolls and I put post-rolls.
Absolutely. I hate mid-rolls because technical videos in particular, you just don't want them disrupted. So Fran, Julian, Dave at EEV Vlog, myself, we have videos at the start, videos at the end, but there's nothing in the middle. And we keep getting pestered at times saying you should put more adverts in the middle, but no, because it's a distraction. It spoils the flow of the video.
Yeah, I agree. And also because Google is quite abusive with some of their ads. There's some people that were reporting that there was something like a 6-minute ad in the middle of a 10-minute video, which was unskippable. That's to me, that's unforgivable.
That's just instantly reload the video, and if it's not going to reload it without that huge advert in it, then skip to another video fundamentally.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate. And just like I know that someone giving you $1 a month on Patreon is something like 1,000 times more what that person would have given you by watching even a video riddled with mid-rolls. So
Patreon is very good. It's helped support this channel, especially at times that YouTube was being unfavorable towards technical channels, as it sometimes does. Because we're technology and science and chemistry is all considered dangerous for some reason. There's been times in the dark past that adverts have been literally just stripped off our channels, and at those times Patreon was what kept things going. It's extremely valuable to technical channels, the Patreon support.
Is YouTube sort of transitioning into your main income stream, if you don't mind me asking? Because I don't see very many shows happening in the last year or so.
It is. Certainly over the last year, I'm very glad that YouTube was here, because otherwise I would not have had any income whatsoever. All my work got cancelled last year, and this year my main jobs have already been cancelled because they just can't get the insurance to actually run shows with the unknown future, and because they require a lot of equipment to be installed. But fortunately, or unfortunately it could be, during the pandemic, with everybody being trapped at home, YouTube was actually doing really well during the last year. So that kind of made up for it, for the loss of revenue from what I'd call real work.
Are you going back to real work when you have the opportunity?
Couldn't give up real work because I don't regard YouTube as being a secure source of income. Literally, if California had its way, and with their Proposition 65 or whatever it is, all the militants jumped in the bandwagon, your channel could literally be deleted overnight, because there's definite things I do in my channel are dangerous and inappropriate, and I always regard it as a job that someone clicking a little checkbox somewhere, and your channel could be instantly deleted. So I always sort of keep real work just in case, and I also kind of prefer a hands-on approach to work as well. It keeps you more active than just making videos.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just so people know, there are going to be links to Clive's Patreon in the description. But I would also recommend that the listeners go check out his Odyssey channel too, because that is an alternative that is, might get deleted. Who knows? But if YouTube decides to delete his channel, you'll still be able to find him there.
Yep, you don't need to provide a link to the Patreon. Generally speaking, if people enjoy the channel, looking at bigclive.com and watching the videos, they could find a link there if they wish to contribute. But certainly Odyssey, which used to be LBRY, is just an independent platform, and you can set it up to mirror your videos, and it is a security thing. It's just that horrible feeling that if YouTube did block my channel for some reason, then I could still keep posting on, well, all my content would be there. If the channel got deleted in YouTube, and anything can happen, it would mostly be still present on Odyssey, and also I could keep posting new videos in Odyssey. And that's another advantage of Patreon, is that if I ever am too naughty, or they decide that my videos are too dangerous, then the people on Patreon, I can send a message to them saying, well, here's where the videos are now. You won't be able to find them on YouTube because, well, the channel's been deleted.
And if Patreon thinks that you're too naughty, you can always move to OnlyFans, I guess.
OnlyFans, or indeed, what was the other one? It's the other one based in Russia.
Oh, I wouldn't know that.
Subscribestar, I think it is. That's what Naomi Wu moved to, and also some other channels that got blocked for being too controversial and having political views or things like that.
I know a lot of the American gun channels moved to Pornhub for a little bit because that's the only place they could host their content.
Well, wherever you can host your content, that's how it works. If it came to it, I'd start posting my videos on a porn channel, just if that's where I could host them, so to speak. Not sure how the porn channel would take that. Not really sure.
Have you ever heard of a website called Floatplane?
I've not.
So have you heard of Linus Tech Tips?
Yes, I have.
So Floatplane is...
oh, yes. It's his version. Go. Yep.
Exactly. Would you ever consider joining Floatplane? Because I think it's open now to any creator. But
right.
Like small creators like me, it doesn't make any sense because I don't have enough interest. You don't gain viewership on Floatplane. You just serve your viewers a better experience, basically. But would you ever consider Floatplane?
If it came to it, yes, I would. But at the moment, YouTube is the primary platform. It makes sense to stay on YouTube for as long as possible. I thought you actually said Flipplane, and after you'd been talking about porn sites, things like that, I wondered, is this some weird porn site you're talking about? But Flowplane, yeah, I knew he was doing something like that, but I don't think anything's going to compete with YouTube for the foreseeable future.
Oh, definitely not, especially for discovery. There's no better way to find your audience than YouTube at the moment.
Indeed.
So speaking of finding the audience, are we ever going to see the return of the, I forgot the name, the hot dog electrocutor?
The Presto hot dogger.
There we go, the hot dogger.
Be honest, the Bear Forks is better because it provides a better, more open visual experience. But unfortunately, that's so YouTube non-friendly, showing Bear Forks stuffed into food and connected to 240 volts. But the Presto hot dogger is always here in the sidelines. I should do a pickle, but again, it steams up inside. It may be safe, but it steams up, and on the other hand, I could stick the forks in the pickle and then I could spray vinegar all over my workbench and components, which is also a downside. Need a dedicated destructive area.
Yeah, like maybe outside where you can just hose it down after.
Yeah, at some point, once I can actually get the materials, because it's gone a bit hard for getting basic materials here. I'm going to kit my garage out with proper benches so that I can do more dangerous things, including welding with the sparks flying about a bit, which will be more useful. I can't really do that indoors here.
I'm actually thinking that I love the hot dogger videos, and I actually like the MRE videos. I'm wondering if you can combine the two, maybe stick the forks through the unopened packets of food or something. I don't know. There's got to be something there.
Not sure that would go. Certainly the hot dogger's only suitable for reheating things, and it has to make a decent connection. And if the packets were metallized, it might cause slight issues. Yeah, it's viable.
Would you ever consider a collaboration with someone like Electro Boom or something like that to play with your hot dogger?
Yes, it would, but the downside is that, of course, Electro Boom's in Canada with you, and likewise, like channels like Ave, it'd be good to do a collaboration, but it's the fact we're distant, and I'm here in the Isle of Man, in the middle of the Irish Sea. There's not many other technical YouTubers even in the vicinity. Collaborations would be good.
That's very true. But just to show you the scale of Canada, you're not that much further than I am. I think he's about, like, I don't know, 1,200 kilometers away. Canada is huge.
Right, okay. Never really considered the size of Canada. I will say it's very strange that an awful lot of the technical channels are Canadian.
Really?
It suggests that Canada is a very technical place, which does make sense.
Oh, I just looked it up. So Electro Boom is 4,361 kilometers away from me.
Okay, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's by road, obviously, but it's still like it's probably about $1,000 to fly from here to Vancouver.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's expensive. How far are you from the mainland?
Mainland. I can see the mainland from the local beach. That's it's not too far away. It's typically a 1-hour flight or 50-minute flight to get to Glasgow from here. Or Edinburgh.
So too far to swim, but but still.
But apparently you can go on a jet ski. You can actually travel between on a good day, which people sometimes do.
Have you ever partaken in jet skiing? I can't picture you on a jet ski.
No, I haven't. Not yet. No.
I would love
controversy. Someone tried defeating the lockdown by driving over to the island on a jet ski.
That's awesome. I would love a picture of you in a life jacket on a jet ski. I think that would be so out of place. I think it would be awesome.
Yeah.
You don't seem too into it.
It's not my thing, really. The sort of like that sort of. I don't know what would be. I'd give a jet ski a go, but it's not really what I'd call my chosen hobby as such.
Yeah, I think you're way more at home blowing up things on your bench for sure.
Indeed. Or driving cherry pickers. That would be much more fun.
I think it's actually been quite a while since you've actually blown something up on your bench, though.
It is, but there's a reason for that. In the beginning, it was the room was clear, and now the room is absolutely covered in boxes of stuff. So if something blew up and a spark went into it, the place would probably go up in flames. So that's why if I want to blow stuff up, I'm going to have to get the garage set up because it is brick and more solid and exposed wood that can be dealt with if something goes horribly wrong.
I'm just thinking back to, I feel like maybe one of your oldest videos, maybe your first video, but whatever possessed you to put a firecracker up a Barbie's butt?
Was just literally done as a viral video. It popped into my head one day, and I'd seen the doll in a Poundland and just thought it looked so twee and Barbie-ish. Then I just I did it in a single take as well. So yeah, that's kind of worked well. The video still does the rounds, but it was also a lesson in not. If you have a video that looks as though it's going to go viral, you'll get companies that they get in touch with you and try to buy the rights of it off you so they can monetize it themselves. I signed the rights over to Dukin Media, and it turned out to be a bad idea,
Oh,
particularly in their early years, because they didn't really keep their side of the deal. And, once you've signed something like that away, it's gone. So that's an education, a useful education.
interesting. And actually, it is not your most viewed videos. Your most viewed video is the simple guide to electronic components, which I would strongly recommend anybody learning electronics goes to take a look. That was a fantastic video. I really appreciated that one for sure.
Yeah, it's reassuring that it's a more popular video on my channel, but the Fanny Flambeau did win the views in Facebook because it was copied left, right, and center. That educational video, the Simple Guide to Components, that's one of those ones that I had to switch my brain off and imagine what if I was just starting out in electronics again from scratch. It was quite a hard video to make. It was very loosely scripted. It took a long time to make that video.
And it seems to have paid off. You got 5.8 million views on it in the last 5 years.
Yep.
That's damn impressive.
So surprised it's still up because I gave that resistor color code mnemonic in it that in hindsight I wouldn't have put that in. It's the one, you know how I learned the resistor color code, Billy Brown revives in your gin but values good whiskey. So you get the black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, grey, white for the resistors. In that video, I said the easiest one to remember of them all is that black boys rape our young girls, but virgins go without. And it's like, and that's something people keep reporting that video for since then. They're not interested in the whole rest of the video. It's just that one bit that they feel it's racist, so they report it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it was racist, but
it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is still.
Yeah.
Easiest one to remember, unfortunately, just purely, and I say that in the video, I say it's really inappropriate, but it's the fact it's rude and inappropriate that makes it so easy to remember. People don't see that side of it. They just want to find things to report.
Yeah, that's, well, it's people that don't have to rely on learning the color codes, obviously, right? They're just, they're watching this video for entertainment, and
not
they
even
find
watch the whole video. Find one person, finds it, and then they send a link to their friends. The rest of the video with that timestamp in it, so all their militant friends can go straight to the bit, and then they leave comments that are, it's clear that they haven't watched the rest of the video, they've not seen it in context. That's the only bit they looked at.
Yeah, that's true. This is one of the problems with a YouTube where anybody can watch whatever they want, is that the outrage machine sometimes it just goes absolutely nuts.
It is better now, though. YouTube even has a name for that, when people all gang up on a video or a channel and they group flag it to try and get it taken down. It's called brigading, but it doesn't have the effect now. In the early days, YouTube has grown up from being that initial website where it was just a really simple, when they didn't know it was going to turn into what it's going to turn into, basically taking over the BBC and so on as like the main viewing platform. But in the early days, it had all the growing pains. It never ever considered that people would say, look at an electronics channel or mechanical channel and say, oh, people are going to get hurt doing that, and then they'd group report it. So like the gun channels and so on, that things like Demolition Ranch, it's innocent fun, but they'd actually target them. And in the earliest days, YouTube did take those channels down. As time's gone on, I'm getting less and less videos that are subject to strikes because they're getting wise to people creating false strikes against channels. I used to get quite a lot of strikes against my videos for being potentially dangerous looking.
I mean, it was pretty obvious that you usually said don't do this, and then you showed us what happened if you did, and so
yes, that doesn't really hold up though, does it? I should have more disclaimers, but it's too late to go back and put all the disclaimers on now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? The first video I've seen of yours was testing the dodgy 100-watt LEDs from eBay sellers, which seems to be your 6th highest viewed video up to date.
Right, okay. I couldn't honestly tell you what the highest views videos, but I do think I recall that, the 100-watt LEDs. Yeah.
Yeah, my thought was when I saw, so 6 years ago, I saw these LEDs available on eBay, and I thought, are they garbage or are they going to work? And then I thought, you know what? Maybe somebody has taken a look, like maybe someone has tried it and wrote an article about it, because I wasn't really that big on YouTube 6 years ago. So I Googled it. I said, cheap Chinese 100-watt LEDs or cheap eBay 100-watt LEDs. And your video popped up and I took a look, and I've been a subscriber ever since. So yeah, I have to thank you for your service, taking the risk so we don't have to.
That makes me think of another thing that gets videos flagged. Feature quack products, like those foot detox units, the ones that you put your feet in a bucket of water and it sucks all the impurities out your body, when in reality it's just an electrode corroding really fast in the water with a DC current, so it creates all this brown rust in the water. I've had problems, not just nasty emails from and more from those people who are obviously running businesses offering these services, but they've tried to have the channels and specific videos removed by flagging them and group flagging them. One of the most recent of those was the UVLEN, the filter that slides over your phone and converts your flash LED in your phone into UVC light, which is not scientifically possible at any efficiency. They didn't just get the video demonetized, but they actually managed to get it flagged as not suitable for children, just because they were flagging absolutely everything to try and get me to take it down.
I feel like Dave Jones suffers the same fate from solar roadways and Bataroos or whatever.
Yeah, the Batterizer, he got the grief off those, didn't he? Yeah.
But yeah, he got brigaded on every single video, because I remember he had a video showing all the dislikes on all of his videos, and those videos got something like, I don't know, like 5,000 times more dislikes than all of his other videos.
Yeah, but the dislikes actually count as interaction anyway. I've had what was it? It was the 100-watt LED I connected across 240 volts, that it got equal likes and dislikes, and it became this thing that it was always 50-50 which way it went. But it's popular as a result of that, because even when people are giving dislikes, it actually just counts as that interaction and increases its visibility.
So congratulations, viewers. You played yourself.
Indeed.
Wow, time flies. This has actually been going on quite a while. And I don't know if you know from the other episodes, but I have one question that I ask every single one of my guests. So I'd like to ask you that question now, if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
So the premise is that you have a large government grant to start the business of your dreams. It does not have to be profitable. The point of it being a government means just think of unlimited money spent on you. But it does need to provide a service or a product. What kind of business would you start with that?
Oh, that is such a complex question to ask. I'm not sure. That would require some deep and long-term thought. No, I couldn't answer that question. I'd have to give it a lot of thought. But if it was to benefit society in general, it would be an educational system, or it might be providing packs of components to kids, Arduinos and stuff like that, to basically try and get them interested in electronics. I'm not really sure. I really don't know. That's a very difficult one to answer.
Well, I mean, we can break it into pieces. So you said if it was going to be something to benefit society, would you feel compelled that this business would have to benefit society necessarily?
Yes, I would. I'm kind of very pro-society, so to speak, so I wouldn't just be wanting to make a quick buck and run away with all the money. It would have to benefit people in some positive way.
So definitely something beneficial, and you said something a little bit, in the educational sense, like providing things for people who don't have them, right?
Yes, to a degree. Have you just done something at your end, or is it my end that it's just suddenly gone very quiet?
Oh, maybe on your end?
Right, no, it's suddenly back. It's back again. I don't know what happened there. It suddenly went very quiet.
Could be an internet hiccup as well.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, that's a complex question to answer. I really don't know what the answer to that would be.
Well, I don't know is a valid answer because it's purposely open-ended, right? So it just is what it
Too
is.
open-ended, particularly in the middle of a stream. It's something that if you asked it beforehand, it would. I was hoping you'd just ask something simple, but no, it's quite a complex and a question that involves a lot of deep thought of what you'd do. I don't know the answer to that one. I'd have to give it some serious thought.
And that's completely fine. Actually, the goal is to see how different people approach the question, and the fact that you want to think about it a lot more is just it is an answer in itself. It doesn't say anything bad or good about you. It just means that you're different from the others. That's all.
Yeah. But what I would like society to recognize more. I've noticed one of the things of this channel is it's made me realize that there's a type of human that is designed almost like born with the function of designing, building, and maintaining society. People who are often classed as being autistic are just optimized for technical work. I'd like to see more recognition of that. So maybe it would be something biased in that direction. Not really sure.
I was actually going to get to that. You had sort of, I mean, for not having a better word for it, some sort of eugenics approach to technological people. You were asking questions like people's eye colors based on and compared
Yeah.
to their professions. What was the result of that?
Well, it seems that the theory here is that people with the darker eyes have a much higher percentage of melanin, not just in their eyes, but in their brain as well. And that makes their thoughts more focused. It acts as an insulator between the neurological networks. So people with the darker eyes are capable of making much simpler but faster decisions. Whereas the lighter the eyes get, and it seems to go to extremes, you'll go through hazel, which is they're good at technical things, but diagnostics as well as more making quick decisions. But once you get to the grey-eyed guys and gals, where it's really pale, light blue, then that's where you find all the programmers and their thoughts, their brains. They're almost an extreme. They're dysfunctional. I think that's possibly where a lot of the autistic spectrum lies, and that could be because if the eyes are light coloured, there's less melanin in the brain. This is the theory that is going about. I'm not sure how accurate it is. And it means that when you think of something, instead of the chemical reactions in your brain happening in very short, straight lines, they diffuse out through. You tend to overthink things. And this it kind of makes it more suitable for complex diagnoses or designing or writing software. But it actually makes them less suitable for jobs that require instant decisions and functional, practical jobs. So there's a kind of balance. But if you look at it now, if you've got any friends who are really abstract and autistic, take a look at the colour of their eyes, particularly if they're super, super technical to the point of being dysfunctional, not able to have a family and stuff like that. It's almost like, I don't know. I do think that, there is a type of human that is just optimized for maintenance and repairing stuff. That's their job in life, so to speak.
So I've got hazel eyes. Can you just repeat what you said about
Hazel eyes is right in the middle, and the bizarre thing is a lot of mechanics seem to have hazel eyes because it combines the sort of getting the job done quickly, but also having good diagnostic skills. This is sort of where that fits in. It's right in the middle of the range, so to speak.
That's interesting. And my wife, she's got blue eyes. Did you have a correlation with the blue eyes?
The blue eyes comes in at the lighter end of the spectrum and usually is associated with people who might have a scientific job, working in a lab or something like that. It was notable for some bizarre reason that people with green eyes often worked in labs. But it could be she may have a computational job. Not sure.
Actually, my wife might be disappointed. She actually has greenish eyes. I don't know why I said blue eyes right there, but she is a civil engineer by profession.
That sounds about right. Actually, yep.
Very interesting.
You can look at that now. I was very cautious about it. It doesn't help the fact that although there's a there are more brown eyes in the world than blue eyes. That's largely because of places like China and India and places like where they have the high sort of the eyes tend to be darker colours. So it kind of skews the results because not many of them watch my channel as such. So it does have a quite a high Indian percentage of viewers. Um, it's a thing. It's a theory. It's not anything hard, and it's certainly not discriminating. It's not going to say that if you've got brown eyes you can't be a programmer, and if you've got blue eyes you can't be a trade on a site or something like that, because you find the whole mix of people. But I do get the feeling that the perfect combination, if you've got a couple of guys working on a site together doing installation, would be to have a blue-eyed one and a brown-eyed one. The brown-eyed one gets the job done, the blue-eyed one solves all the technical problems, is how I'd summarize it. You guys, you may find that differently. It's just a theory, and I don't want to sound like some eugenics discriminator in any way.
I think the important thing to remember is that all that Clive has found here is a correlation, and a correlation is not a causation. And a correlation doesn't even predict anything. It just means two variables tend to vary in the same direction. That's all. That's it. That's all.
Yeah, because I don't want to start discriminating and making it sound like I'm into Hitler eugenics and the Aryan thing like that. I found that out afterwards. I didn't realise until someone kept mentioning Hitler, and I think, what are they talking about? And he had that thing that he thought that it was a completely different race. I disagree with it being a different race. I think it's a different type of person. A human with a different function.
Yeah, we know so little about genetics. I mean, we know a ton, but we know so little in the the big scheme of things, because identical twins end up growing up completely different. They look the same, they have the same DNA, but they have different interests, they have different friend groups, they have different everything. So it just is what it is.
I relate it to the beehive thing, because a beehive has more than one type of bee. They'll all have different functions. You'll have the ones that guard the hive. You'll get the nursery bees. They all seem to be assigned a function at some point. And the ones that actually go out and harvest the nectar and stuff like that, the pollen. And I think the same applies to humans, that, at some point, either when we're born or very early in our life, you're given that twist. And it's like Eric O again. He was saying that, how many of us took our toys apart as we were kids. Instead of playing with them, we took our toys apart. That's the difference. It's the ones that are inquisitive about what's inside and more technically biased from an early age.
Yeah, and you know what? It's the people who continue to be technically biased, because, for example, a lot of my coworkers will replace a failed part and chuck it in the bin, but I will take it apart and see what inside that part has failed. And maybe I didn't learn anything on that specific one, but when you start doing that to a few things, you start seeing patterns, right? You start picking that up.
Common failures. And that's Eric O does that from time to time, doesn't he? He'll occasionally take the component that he's taken out, he'll actually strip it apart. In South Main Auto, and you'll see the inside as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love, because Eric O is doing what I preach to my students, is that it's not enough to think that a part has failed. You have to prove that a part has failed. And Eric does a great job of proving, his logic. Like he's like, I think this thing needs an alternator, but here are the readings that make me think that, and here are the readings that prove it, type thing.
Yeah, it is all practical. It's good. Avoiding the parts canon.
Yep. We joke because we do a lot of warranty work, because I work at a dealership. And so the manufacturer does not want to pay for warranty diagnostics. They say, we've got a list of parts that fail commonly. Do those first. If it doesn't fix it, then replace, then do the diag, and then we'll pay you for the diag. But so we always joke about loading up the parts cannon when the car's warranty. You just shoot from the hip and hope you get it. But it's a terrible environment to fire up the parts cannon.
It's fast, but always end up with these components that you feel you should throw them away, but you've got several components and one of them is faulty, and the other ones potentially work and you don't want to throw them away, so you end up putting them on a shelf somewhere, and then you're going up later on, then you can't remember, does that work or does that not work? Tricky.
Yeah, yeah. I bring things home for the YouTube channel, and now for the college. So the college has a nice supply of broken and quote unquote broken stuff that I can show the students. So it's a good side effect of that.
Every technical person has a garage full of stuff from work, just stuff that they couldn't bear to throw away. They kept in the case they needed it in the future or needed bits out in the future. It just seems like people hoard technical stuff.
And before we go, because the episode is going a little long,
Okay.
do you have anything that you are sort of going to make a video on, that you're excited to make a video about, something upcoming that you could share?
Oh, there's various things. I'd like to make a video about. I've already made it, but I then deleted it because it was rubbish. Because it also almost needs to be done the sort of PowerPoint thing. It was about ozone. It's about the details of ozone and how it's actually an important part of air and how it gets depleted when it comes into houses. And it was quite a complex video because there seems to be this strange theory that ozone is this terrible thing, you shouldn't have it in your house. In reality, it looks like every house should have trace level ozone in it because it's a natural part of air, and it's the bit that's missing out of houses. Not a terribly technical thing, but it was more from the scientific aspect.
I think that'll make an awesome video. And is it just you weren't happy with the end result?
Kind of needs to be done as a PowerPoint presentation, and well, you know me, I'm not really into stuff like that. So needs slides and sort of text and stuff like that. I'll do it at some point. Either that or I'll just do it as a sort of face video.
Well, I'm a professional PowerPoint maker at this point at the college, so if you want help with that.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. It's kind of that. I really should do it myself though, because it's like it needs the voiceover as well as the slides.
Oh, no, I just mean I can provide the slides and then you can do the voiceover.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I've made the slides. I just need to put it. I'll find something at some point. That's the downside of using a Chromebook. The upside is it's super fast. It's great for browsing the internet. It's very secure. The downside is that certain things, it's not as ideal as a full-blown computer. But I keep the full-blown computer for other things.
Oh, you do have a full-blown computer after
Well,
all.
I have. Yeah, well, I designed my circuit boards on it, but it's actually it's not what you call the state of the art. I really need to get a new computer. I've been using the old laptops for so long that they've gone past their era, so to speak.
You and Julian, because Julian Eilert has a PC that slows down when he turns on the webcam on OBS.
Absolutely. Well, I don't even think mine would run OBS. It's just because I've switched to the Chromebook and I've never looked back cause most of the stuff I do is just browsing the internet or watching videos and stuff like that. So the Chromebook is just a really good option for that. It's slicker than the old bloated Windows mess.
Yeah, I agree with you on the Windows bloat. That's for sure. Any closing thoughts, Clive?
Not really, no.
Well,
I think that's an open-ended question. Oh, nothing in particular.
Yeah, I tend to do that. But I just want to thank you very much for joining me this evening. I know you're a busy man. You're hard to nail down. And thanks for taking the time to talk with me tonight.
It's a pleasure.
And for those of you listening to the episode, definitely go and subscribe to Big Clive if you haven't yet. I don't know what you're doing on this channel if you haven't seen Big Clive yet. So go hit that subscribe. Go check out his Patreon if you can afford it. It's well worth it. I'm a Patreon supporter myself.
I just want to say Patreon starts at $1 because there's no multiple tiers or anything like that in that. It's just quality all the way. So yeah.
Do it. So sign up. $1 a month. It's
I don't want to push the Patreon. It sounds like me being cynical and commercially exploitative and things like that. But I'd say definitely check out the channel if you've not seen bigclive.com. You might enjoy the channels, and likewise, if you're not subscribed to Simple Electronics, then you could subscribe to Simple Electronics too.
Yeah, Yeah, you definitely I'm not going to say no when Clive says go subscribe to Simple Electronics. I'm definitely not going to deny that one. Thanks so much for your time, Clive, and thanks all the listeners for listening. I'll catch you guys in the next one.